When you think of Drew Lock, what do you think of? Maybe it's that time he started rapping on the sidelines. Maybe it's that backpack celebration he had against Texas that one time. Maybe you think of my YouTube channel, which would be pretty cool, thank you. But at the end of the day, Drew Lock is going to be remembered by most people as being a mediocre, average, backup journeyman quarterback that's going to be brought up in one of those tweets that says, men just love naming average, mediocre quarterbacks that retired 10 years ago or something like that. But honestly, when I think of Drew Lock, I think of him arguably being the greatest Mizzou quarterback of all time, him being the most pro-ready quarterback entering the 2019 NFL Draft, and still having some untapped potential with him entering year 6. And you might be thinking to yourself, how does a veteran backup quarterback still have untapped potential left in him? Well, let's go back in time to answer that question. Now, Drew Lock at Mizzou might have been the greatest Mizzou quarterback of all time, but he was a part of some crappy teams. Now, Drew Lock didn't start out too great. In his freshman year, he only threw for 4 touchdowns compared to 8 interceptions, but his sophomore year of 2016, he was a lot better touchdown to interception ratio, and a lot more passing yards. However, Mizzou, they were terrible during this time. In 2015, they went 5-7 after starting 3-0, and in 2016, they went 4-8. But in 2017, everything changed for Mizzou and Drew Lock. After starting 1-5, including an embarrassing loss at home against Auburn 51-14, they would win out, winning 6 straight games and going 7-5, and they would clinch their first bowl appearance since 2014. We would get smoked in our bowl game against Texas in the Texas Bowl 33-16, and this was the infamous Drew Lock backpack game I was talking about earlier. But 2018 was about to be even better. Mizzou would have an even better season. They would finish the regular season 8-4, and they would enter a bowl game ranked for the first time in 4 seasons, where in the Liberty Bowl they would lose to 6-6 Oklahoma State 38-33. in a game that Mizzou should have easily won. In 2017, Drew Lock had an amazing season, almost 4,000 passing yards, 44 touchdowns, and 13 interceptions, and then the very next season was a bit of a downgrade, but he was still one of the best quarterbacks in college football, having almost 3,500 passing yards, 28 touchdowns, and 8 interceptions. He was easily the best player on Mizzou during this time, easily one of the best quarterbacks in college football during this time, and if it weren't for him, Mizzou would be in a much worse state during, I keep on saying this, during this time. During his time at Mizzou, Drew Lock arguably became the greatest Mizzou quarterback of all time as he set records for the school and even in the SEC. We all knew how good he was in college, but how was he going to fare in the NFL? The 2019 NFL Draft quarterback class was seen as a weaker QB class compared to other years, but you still had guys like Kyler Murray from Oklahoma who won the Heisman, Dwayne Haskins from Ohio State, rest in peace, and Daniel Jones from Duke, but Drew Lock was in that conversation. According to many scouts, Drew Lock was a round 1 projected quarterback, and he was the most pro-ready QB in the draft class, and according to Lance Zierlein, his NFL player comparison is Matthew Stafford, and honestly, at the time, with the build and his play style, it makes sense. In the draft itself, though, all 3 quarterbacks would go ahead of Lock, and he'd fall all the way to the 2nd round as he was drafted by the Denver Broncos. Now, the Broncos have been trying to find their franchise quarterback since Peyton Manning retired, and before Drew Lock, they did draft Paxton Lynch, but that experiment failed completely. So Drew Lock would be sitting behind Joe Flacco for the 2019 season, or until they decide to start Drew Lock. Well, in 2019, Joe Flacco easily had the worst season of his pro career. In 8 games started, he went 2-6, a little under 2,000 passing yards, 6 touchdowns, and 5 interceptions. But Drew Lock still didn't start after this. Yeah, after those 8 games Joe Flacco started, Brandon Allen would start 3 games, and he was not good. He was just a mediocre average quarterback. And finally, in Week 13, the Broncos decided to start rookie Drew Lock, and he would start the rest of the season. In the 5 games he started as a rookie, Drew Lock was easily the best quarterback on the Broncos this season. He went 4-1, threw for a little over 1,000 yards, 7 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions, and while in 5 games those numbers aren't eye-popping, those are definitely solid enough. And Broncos fans and the Broncos organization thought that they had the franchise quarterback for their future. As a Mizzou fan and a Drew Lock fan, I was really hoping that this was the case, and it was looking like it. We had guys like Blaine Gabbert and Chase Daniel in the past who turned out to be nothing in the NFL. So if Drew Lock can do that, I will be incredibly happy. And it was looking like it was going. I don't even know what I'm saying. It was looking like he was going to be the franchise quarterback, though. This stretch of games was also when Drew Lock started rapping on the sideline, and this just made fans even more eager for the future. This made fans love Drew Lock even more. After this season, Joe Flacco would sign a one-year deal with the Jets, and this would mean that the Drew Lock era in Denver would officially begin, and hopefully for the Broncos, they have truly found their franchise quarterback and their Peyton Manning replacement. But, it was looking good. Drew Lock had a promising rookie season, and I think this is it. And in the draft, the Broncos would go ahead and draft Jerry Jeudy, a wide receiver from Alabama, and honestly, at 15, this was a huge steal, and they also addressed a much-needed position at wide receiver, and you pair this guy up, a young wide receiver, with Drew Lock. It was looking really good for the Broncos. But there was one big mistake the Broncos made in the 2020 offseason. After the 2019 season, the Broncos would fire their offensive coordinator, Rich Scangar. I'm not going to say that name. I don't know how, but that's just an awful move. Drew Lock was playing well under him, and now, after just his first season, Drew Lock is going to have to adapt to a whole new offense, and this just isn't smart by the Broncos' part. This is really damaging to a young quarterback's mind. I don't know what the Broncos were thinking here. Anyway, heading into the weird 2020 season, expectations were still high for Drew Lock, but he drastically failed them. Drew Lock did not have a good season. He was up and down all year. He missed some games due to injury and COVID, and it was not a season that I expected or a lot of Broncos fans expected. It was really disappointing. Threw for under 3,000 yards, 16 touchdowns, and 15 interceptions in just 13 games. And in those 13 games he started, the Broncos went 4-9, and honestly, after this season, it felt like the Broncos did not give Drew Lock a second chance. And it doesn't help when rookie Charger quarterback Justin Herbert, who was in the same division as Drew Lock, broke multiple rookie passing records and took home Offensive Rookie of the Year. But you never know. I say you give Drew Lock one more season. This might have just been a sophomore slump. You never know. He could bounce back, and he could be the player just like he was at Mizzou. Well, we would get some horrible news in the development of Drew Lock. The Broncos would trade for Teddy Bridgewater in the 2021 offseason and possibly make him a starter for the season. This is really not good. If this turns out to be true that Teddy Bridgewater does start the 2021 season, it means the Broncos have officially given up on Drew Lock. And this would turn out to be the case. Teddy Bridgewater was the guy for the 2021 season, and he was not bad at all. In fact, he might have been the best quarterback since maybe Trevor Siemian for the Broncos. He went 7-7 with the team, over 3,000 passing yards, 18 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. That's by no means excellent, but it certainly is good. And I think if we started all 17 games, the Broncos might have made the playoffs. I say this because in the 3 games Drew Lock started in, he was awful, and they lost all 3 games. Only 787 passing yards, 2 touchdowns and 2 interceptions, a horrible touchdown-interception ratio, and honestly, his confidence was dying in Denver. In fact, there was nothing left. It was a dead plant. There was nothing left to grow, and he's stuck on the Denver for at least 2 more seasons, unless a team was desperately trying to trade away their quarterback, and they could trade away Drew Lock and, maybe a few other players and draft picks. Oh, wait. In a record-breaking trade, the Broncos would trade for quarterback Russell Wilson, and in return, the Seahawks got a haul of picks and players, and one of these players was Drew Lock, and this would help Lock big time. As for one, no one really knew it at the time, but this would go down as one of the worst trades in NFL history, and the Seahawks were on the winning end, so this helps the case for Drew Lock. It helps his legacy a little bit, and he also gets a new, fresh start. He can get his confidence back, and he's going to be competing against Geno Smith, who hasn't had a real starting job in the NFL since 2014, which at the time was 8 years. Well, Drew Lock completely blew this opportunity. Up to this point, it looked like Geno Smith had already secured the starting quarterback spot for the Seahawks, but it was solidified when Drew Lock had a horrible preseason outing against the Cowboys, throwing 3 interceptions in the first half, and it was pretty much wraps from there for the 2022 season. And it is not helpful for Drew Lock at all that Geno Smith in 2022 went on to have one of the greatest comeback seasons by a single NFL player in NFL history. He started all 17 games because they didn't clinch a playoff spot until the final game of the regular season, and he also threw for over 4,000 passing yards, 30 touchdowns, 11 interceptions, made the Pro Bowl team, and won Comeback Player of the Year, and like I said, he led the Seahawks to the playoffs. Drew Lock didn't even play a snap in 2022, and his career looked over. But he was going to get one more chance in 2023. In Week 15 of 2023, Geno Smith was rolled out against the Eagles on Monday Night Football, and he'd been kind of banged up for the past 2 weeks, but now he was for sure not going to play, and that would mean Drew Lock would make his first start since 2021. Now, the Seahawks would be playing the Eagles, and they had started 10-1, but they had just dropped their 2 last games, granted, against very good teams, and now that the Eagles are playing the Seahawks, especially without Geno Smith, many people thought they'd bounce back and return to their normal winning ways. However, Drew Lock and the Seahawks would shock everybody as they would beat the Eagles 20-17. And Drew Lock, he had an alright game, but he showed up when it mattered the most, and he gave the Seahawks the win in the final minute. I say in the final minute because with like 25 seconds left, Drew Lock heaved the ball up to Jackson Smith-Njigba, and it was a touchdown. It was a very, he had other plays before. It was a long drive, only a few plays, but it looked like the Drew Lock of old, back in like Mizzou days. So it was really, really cool to see. And that was Drew Lock's only game started as a Seattle Seahawk. This offseason, Drew Lock signed with the New York Giants, and honestly, he's in a very good situation right now. He's going to be backing up Daniel Jones, and we all know how bad he is. I feel like he's really just 1 or 2 games away from being completely benched in general, and you know what, Drew Lock, I believe he can step up and he can show out for the New York Giants. Obviously, there's also Tommy DeVito, and I think this is the best situation Drew Lock has been in since his rookie season. And I'm excited to see what he does. I still believe there's untapped potential in there, and I really do believe that he can be the starter for the New York Giants someday. And, well, that's about it. Bye.